That was the opening to Prism, a Matthew Shipp album with William Parker on bass and Whit Dickey on drums. Welcome to the second episode of the Burning Ambulance podcast, which is now available on iTunes and on Stitcher. So however you're listening, I'm glad to know you're out there, and please feel free to subscribe, to email your comments to burningambulance@gmail.com, or whatever you want to do. This time out, I'm interviewing Matt Shipp. I've been a fan of his for over 20 years and a friend of his for almost that long. Prism was the first record of his I ever heard. It came out in 1996, and I don't remember where I read his name, but something put him on my radar. And one day I was in a record store my friend ran, and he had this album, the original version, on Brinkman. It has subsequently been reissued by Hat Hut out of Switzerland, but at the time it was on this tiny Dutch label. And as far as I know, it was the only jazz record they ever put out. Most of the other stuff they released was indie rock. They did a bunch of Betty Serveert records, they put out Oxbow's Let Me Be a Woman, and then there was this one Matthew Shipp record. Anyway, I bought it, I listened to it, and I was blown away by it. I hadn't heard any really heavy-duty avant-garde jazz piano stuff yet at that point, and this was an album with just 2 tracks, each of which was about a half hour long and totally intense. I mean, he was just hammering on the keyboard with so much force that it was pretty much breathtaking. So soon after that, I found out that he was also the piano player for the David S. Ware Quartet, that in fact the band on Prism was the Ware Quartet at the time, minus Ware. And so I started listening to all of their albums as well. And I first met Matt at the Vision Festival in New York in 1998, where the Ware Quartet was playing. And again, this was a long time ago, so I don't even remember how I heard that there was such a thing as the Vision Festival. I probably read about it in the Village Voice, but anyway, I went down to the Orange Sands Arts Center on Rivington Street, and I met a whole bunch of people that I'm still friends with today. Stephen Jorg from Fidelity Records, William Parker, his wife Patricia, Steve Dalachinsky, and Matt. Matt has been one of avant-garde jazz's most compelling figures since the early 1990s, and a big part of that is due to his intense productivity. He frequently releases multiple albums in a year. Sometimes they're solo performances, sometimes they're by his current trio. In 2017 alone, he's put out a trio album with Michael Bizio on bass and Newman Taylor Baker on drums called Piano Song. He's put out a solo album called Invisible Touch at Taktlos Zurich. He's done Vessel in Orbit, which is a collaboration with Whit Dickey on drums and Matt Maneri on violin. This is Beautiful Because We Are Beautiful People, which is with saxophonist Matt Walerian and William Parker on bass. Magnetisms, which is a reissue of a 1999 disc with Parker and Rob Brown on saxophone, but it's been paired with a brand new live performance by the same group. And he's put out 11 albums in collaboration with saxophonist Ivo Perlman and various other people. Sometimes Parker, sometimes drummers, sometimes duo albums. Anyway, over the last 19 years or so, I've interviewed Matt several times for my book New York Is Now, which came out in 2001, for the Village Voice, for The Wire, for the first print issue of Burning Ambulance back in 2010, and probably a few other places too. But still, when I got him on the phone to talk this time, there were things that he and I had never discussed about his past, his present activities, and to some degree his future. So in this interview, we talk about his earliest days and how he decided to become a professional musician, his current activities, including his creative relationship with Perlman and his decision to leave the Thirsty Ear label after nearly 20 years in partnership with them, and his outspoken opposition to Donald Trump. So I'm going to play a little bit more music. This next piece is a version of Monk's Nightmare, which was originally on his album Circular Temple from 1993, but this version comes from the new album Invisible Touch at Taktlos Zurich, which is also on the Hat Hut label. And right after that, we'll get into the interview. How old were you when you started playing piano?
I was 5 years old.
And was it your idea, your parents' idea? What was the
It,
deal?
it, it was my idea. It was based on hearing a church organist at my parents' church that it really moved me, and I decided I wanted to do that.
And were they immediately supportive? Like, you know.
Yeah, yeah, no, they were cool. I mean, the kid want to do something, why not?
Did you grow up in like an artistically, supportive or a creative kind of a household, or what was the deal?
Yeah, I would say that my parents had a very open mind towards music, and in fact, when they were younger, in the like say the 50s, when they got married in 1950, so they were I wouldn't say hipsters, but they were buying records, the type of records that maybe people that say read Esquire magazine, bought. And I would, I would also, not that they didn't subscribe to Playboy, but that whole kind of like paradigm that existed in the late 50s, 60s of like readers of Esquire, say Playboy and whatever, and that whole hipster sense, they would have, not that they embodied that lifestyle at all, but as far as like the music part of it, they were checking out stuff, whether it was Miles Davis or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, at what point did you decide that you were actually going to be a musician? Like that was going to be your career or your life or whatever?
Um, uh, I don't really remember exactly, like, but it just kind of took more. At first I was into it, but it was just a side thing, and then slowly but surely I got more and more into it. I'm not exactly sure the point where I said like I went, because at first it would have been to be a concert pianist. I don't remember the exact point. It was like, this is what I'm going to do, but it would have been somewhere around 11 or 12. And at the same time, that's not, it's very close to when I got really hooked into jazz also, but I don't remember if there was a bifurcation in my mind as far as like I'm going to be a classical pianist or a jazz pianist. But I know I got really, really serious around 12. Like, I mean, ultra serious.
And again, like the parental angle, I'm curious about because parents support their kids' decisions, but at the same time, there's a lot of risk in
Right.
becoming a musician. Like there's not, if your kid says, "Oh, I'm going to law school," a part of you inside goes, "Yay," But if your kid says, "I'm going to become a jazz piano player," part of you inside goes, "Fuck."
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a big part. I mean, I know, but there's a big part that, I mean, of course they're going to be supportive of your decisions. And, if they see you're working hard at something and or have talent at it, good parents are not going to get in the way. But I don't think any parent is sitting around wanting their kids to go into music as a career, and let alone jazz, or let alone avant-garde jazz. So, um, I mean, I could. There's always the pressure from them to like have a second choice. Do keep doing what you're doing, but get a backup plan in case. And my, I don't remember if that was ever exactly said in an overt fashion, even though I know that was implied. But my situation was always like no, because I just have that much belief in what I myself, and I I do remember like having a talk with my father. This is when I was a little older, and I was really clear about the way I wanted to go, like because my parents actually had met Thelonious Monk
Wow.
um, when he got arrested in my home state of Delaware, because the lawyer Monk had was a family friend that he got assigned in Delaware, so they actually had a chance to meet him, and they were had a few Monk albums and knew a little about him, and they knew the whole kind of like the story. So like it was easy to present like the concept that I wanted to do, saying that I wanted to be a composer and do my own music in the same way like that Monk did, where you have your own thing and you do it, and so it was kind of easy to get that concept across because they knew
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but the other thing with in my situation is I was pretty what's the word, industrious, and I was making money as a musician from pretty early on, whether it was being an assistant church organist or I had like a trio at one point where we kind of did like Bill Evans type of thing, and I played cocktail piano, and I was always kind of, making some money somehow in music, doing little things like that, even as a teenager. So that they saw that I had a work ethic and some sort of business sense about it. So, and I think that helped ease their pain. I mean, there was definitely pain about the decision, from their standpoint, but that eased it a little bit, seeing that at least I had a consciousness of going about it, trying to make some money.
Right, right. I was actually curious about that when you first moved to New York, how you kind of made it, because I didn't know, were you working like the typical shitty piano player jobs, like backing singers
No,
or whatever?
by the time I moved to New York, I was really focused in what I wanted to do. And I by that point I wasn't doing any. I had done all kinds of things. I had played for plays and choirs and stuff before I moved to New York. But once I moved to New York in '84, I was completely focused in my thing. I think around '84, '85, I might have done 2 gigs that were not related to my world,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just stopped it altogether. So by the time I moved to New York, I was not working outside of exactly the area I wanted to work at anymore. And
Okay.
as far as making money, I wasn't, until I started making a living as a musician, which I would say would have started in '89. The first 6 or 7, first 7 years I was in New York, I was doing other jobs, outside of music.
Yeah, that was another question I had, was like, when was the last time you had a non-music type of a job?
'89,
Yeah.
when I got fired from a couple of years I worked at Barnes and Noble. It was before it was a chain.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was just one store, but I worked there for a couple of years, and the guy that brought me in, who I was an assistant manager, got a promotion, so had another manager after he left, and I did not get along with her. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. So let me jump forward to more or less the present day. What led up to your decision to stop recording for Thirsty Ear? Because you've been with them almost 20 years, it seems like. So what
Right.
brought that around?
That thing, that what you just said there, I mean, probably kind of close to a time for a new approach to putting stuff out for me. A, B, I think Thirsty Ear is going to probably be changing somewhat because Peter Gordon, who runs Thirsty Ear, is kind of really involved with the Jazz Connect, the big conference every year and stuff, and he's gone more in a kind of not institutional area, but more of an overall jazz management type of thing, as far as not management as far as managing artists, but as far as being involved in trying to figure out how to make jazz more part of American culture. So I mean, he's not really as concentrated on the label as he was at one time, and I've done so much there that I really kind of feel the need of a kind of to push the refresh button a little bit,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it seemed like the last 5 years or so, they really were putting out almost nothing but your records. Like there would be
Yeah,
one record
it's got
from you, and then
one record from me and one record from somebody else every year.
Yeah, and that's not really a way to run a label.
Right.
I mean,
I mean, last year they put out Tamika Reed, and then a few years ago it was Dawn of Midi, and
right.
both of those records actually made some beautiful noise. They did some nice stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you need a little more than that to have a presence.
Yeah, yeah. So now you're kind of bouncing all over the place. You're on ESP. You're doing stuff with Hat. You just had a record come out on some Polish label I can't remember the name of.
Right.
So do these people?
The Fortune Records is the name of the label. The record is Not Bound. It's Daniel Carter,
Yeah, yeah.
me, Bissio, and with Dickie's actually on that one.
So do these labels, they come to you and say, we want to record one of your shows, or we want to put you in the studio, or do you have like a manager that works that stuff out? How does it?
I have no management per se. I have a partial European agent, but no management. No, with ESP, the guy that runs the label is a longtime friend of mine, and that was, I kind of got open. I have open carte blanche if I want to do something there. So. The Polish label, William Parker had done an album on that label years ago, and I don't even remember how I started talking to the guy, but I did, and I'm still doing a bunch of stuff on Rogart, but he's like a really close friend of mine, and the guy that runs that label, and that label, I was actually the first release on that label ever. I'm kind of have open season on that label too, so. There's no shortage of places to do things if I want to do something. That's not the point. The point is, I am still trying to wind down. Even though it might not seem like that's happening, but I'm trying.
And the Hat live record, the solo one that just came out, what was the story behind that? Did they just kind of say?
Well, that was that concert was in Switzerland, and Hadard's a Swiss label, so Werner, who I obviously, to anybody that knows my history, I have a long history of recording with Hadard. He's friends with the people that run that festival where I played at, and he just contacted me and I would love to put it out. So that was that. And also, he's going to be reissuing Symbol Systems.
Oh, okay.
My first solo. He's buying the rights in the process of buying the rights to that, and is going to be reissuing that.
Cool.
So, yeah, I'm doing a few things with Hadard now too. Yes.
Yeah. Now you've been working a lot with Ivo Perlman over the last few years, including now you're doing some quartet recordings, which I thought you had kind of sworn off of after working with David Ware. So, tell me a little bit about your creative relationship with Ivo and how you guys fit together, what he's like as a collaborator, stuff like that.
Well, I'm really feeling what he's doing heavily now. I mean, he's a really committed musician. He's committed to, like, the relation. If he has a relationship with playing somebody, he really commits to trying to find out what that person's about and really not just doing his thing over you. I mean, he commits to, like, trying to really develop something together, and it's kind of a really beautiful process. And, we're close friends also, and, he's a nut, I like nuts. I mean, obviously the way he goes about his, recording career is nutty, but it's a different approach, and in a situation now where there's no jazz marketplace to speak of anyway, why not? I mean, it can't hurt him putting out the amount of stuff he does because, almost nothing matters now, so you might as well have an extreme approach like that, and it actually is getting him somewhere. I mean, people are noticing,
Yeah, I feel like his profile has grown a lot over the past, now that he's taken this like 6 albums, 7 albums at a time kind of approach. I feel like it is actually working for him. And
yeah, it is, and it is. I mean, Leo Records is giving him carte blanche, and they just said keep bringing it on because now they have people buying. Like when he puts out one set of records, they have orders for everything in that set. It's gotten to be kind of a thing. I mean, of course, he's not breaking the bank, Kamasi Washington style or anything, but within its realm, it's working. It's caught a little buzz, and people think he's a nut, but they're kind of into it.
Yeah, and he's starting to perform live more, right? I mean, he wasn't really much of a live guy as far as I know.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I've done one tour of Europe with him, and we have another tour next year. And so yeah. I really, really value that relationship with him and playing with him, and he's very committed person.
You've also made 3 albums with Matt Walerian. How did that relationship start, and what's the deal there? Did he seek you out?
He approached me, and I didn't know who he was, and I was kind of skeptical. But he had done some stuff with Hamid Drake in the past, so I just asked. So when he approached me, he said, I've worked with Hamid. If you want to, ask him if you don't, because you don't know me or anything. And I was like, oh God, I'm skeptical about it. And I kind of had some gigs coming up in Poland around that area, so it would have been, he wanted to do some stuff, and so I was thinking that, if I do go for it, it makes sense with my schedule at the time. So I asked Hamid, and Hamid was actually like, yeah, you should really work with him. I think you guys would really hit it off. And I was expecting to say, yeah, he's a good musician, but so what? It's just like, but he was actually really like, yeah, I think you guys would really hit it off. I've worked with him, and he's a serious artist. So based on Hamid's recommendation in that way, I contacted him, and we did a concert together. And I was actually kind of taken that he had a real concept and really was focused on it, and he was a serious artist, and so it just started from there, and it's grown, and we to the point where we're actually like talk every day, I mean, somehow, whether it's email or whatever. I mean, he's actually like a really close friend now, even though he's younger and kind of in some way I don't want to say a father figure, but I'm an elder figure to him, but we're really, really close.
Yeah.
And it's been a very fruitful. And it also, he goes about things in a completely different way than I would. So even though I'm kind of the elder figure here, it's kind of a refresh button for me also, because it's giving me a window into kind of little different ways of dealing with stuff.
In what sense, like business or
well,
music,
his approach
or?
to music is just different than mine. I mean, I'm not really centered. I mean, his a very zen approach to things, and that thing that operates within my world too, but in a different way. And it's just the whole attack, and I think my playing on his albums is a lot different than my playing on other albums or my own albums, especially the first album I did with him, the duo album. I think my playing on that is kind of completely different than how I play on anything. So he actually brings out a whole different side of my playing, at least on that album.
That's true with Evo as well too, because I mean he doesn't compose. He's just go in,
right,
press record and go.
Right.
And you write tunes, so it's where do you guys
sometimes right.
Yeah, but I mean, where do you guys like meet in the middle there, like?
Well, I'm trying to write less and less tunes. Let's put it that way. I mean, the way I play with Evo, I've been doing duos with sax players for years, and they have tended to become completely improvisational. Like the stuff I did with Rob Brown, the stuff I did with Evan Parker, with Sid Beer, with Darius Jones, is all completely improvisational. The Darius Jones might not sound like it, but they are completely improvisational. Even though we key in the smaller gestures and tend to try to make something that sounds composed from that, but that's actually been at least in duos, that's been my mode of working, and my favorite way to work with Evo is duo, even though we do so many projects together.
And also the other guy that I remember you working with, who sort of comes from the improv with a capital I world, is John Butcher.
I'm working with Butcher a lot now. That's a very good relationship, and he's a genius at what he does.
He kind of has an approach to the horn that nobody else has. I think, like he's very he's all about like the room that he's playing in as much as the instrument and everything else. It's very.
Well, he's definitely reacts to the environment. Yeah, I mean he's always. I've yet to be able to kind of formulate in verbally what his approach is, because it's so unique. And I know abstractly, like I know how I characterize it without using words. I mean, there's a certain image that comes, but he does is so unique. I've yet to be able to really figure out how to put it into words.
And how does that change what you play?
Well, I'm reactive, so it doesn't. I mean, I don't need words. I mean, I deal with what's in front of me, and that's how. I mean, what's in front of you is different than what's in front of you in a different situation. So that's what changes things. But I find it very easy to play with him because he doesn't try to force an agenda on you. He's definitely really. I'm not. I mean, at times he has something he really wants to get across, and he'll be forceful with that. But at the same time, you never get it. Like, he's never trying to force a trip on you, and that's really rare. I mean, and especially the exact balance he's found, Butcher's found, with getting his thing across, but never trying to force a trip on anybody else within the group. And the way he finds that balance and does it is a very rare thing. I mean, he's a very special musician.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of saxophonists in particular are kind of like a plug-in, almost. You know what I mean? Like, you bring in Pharoah Sanders to your session, and at a certain point you point at him and he does the Pharoah Sanders thing for 5 minutes or whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, that's also I'm not going to go there. I know what you mean, but that's also a product of just having been in the business for years, and you have a certain name recognition, and you've been doing it forever, and it comes down to that at a certain point. That's. But I mean, he's not. Somebody like Pharoah Sanders is not out here with a bunch of younger people trying to make something happen. They did that. They did that years ago. So, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes across the board. I mean, it's like I used to say that about Derek Bailey. Like, they would say, Derek Bailey is a pure improvising musician and he plays differently every time. And I'm like, then how come I can tell it's Derek Bailey in 2 seconds?
Right. Well, I mean, there's a fine line between playing cliches and then having a sound. I mean, you can tell some. I mean, I haven't listened to Derek Bailey enough. I don't know if, like, within the verbal structure of saying somebody's a pure improviser, which is nonsense. Nobody is. That doesn't. It's not possible for the human brain to act outside of a matrix of some sort of pre-established language and just like reach into the void and pull new fresh stuff out every time. But that's a verbal convenience to say that about somebody. And it's first of all, it's impossible. But some people do kind of have a fresher approach to the instrument on a daily basis. I haven't listened to him enough to know if he has like licks or anything. But he certainly attempted or tried to exemplify the idea of that. I just don't know if it's possible within the construct of how the human brain operates.
Right. Now, you've also, like, you mentioned Darius Jones, who is kind of, in musical terms, of the generation behind you, sort of, and so is James Brandon Lewis.
Like 2 or 3 generations behind me.
And so is James Brandon Lewis, who I know I think you know him or have hung out.
Yeah, he was in a class I taught at Atlantic Center of the Arts. I was a visiting artist there for a few, and I got to know him really well. And I helped set up the first record he did. I put him together with William Parker and Gerald Cleaver for that.
Oh, okay. I was wondering how that came together because it didn't seem like something that Sony would say, "Hey, why don't you use this rhythm section?"
Right.
Like if Sony.
No, he recorded that himself and then sold it to Sony. So.
Okay.
And I was helping get him to. I introduced him to William and Charles.
Yeah. Now, do you have any plans to work with him in the future?
I mean, No, I don't really think I should because he's really starting to create a career path on his own that's pretty strong, and I don't think. I think at this point, it's always good to have like some type of validation from some elders, but I don't think he needs it. I think, it's. I'm not making a comparison to Christian Scott, but I think those guys haven't, like, people like that have a ability to connect to their own generation and develop an audience way. And I think the old jazz paradigm way of doing things might not really be what the doctor ordered in his situation, because he can communicate musically. I mean, he can just get up there and people are moved, and that's true with Darius and James both. I mean, I think they're both high level communicators that have a connection to their instrument. They have a connection to modern, the world today, and I don't think I have worked with Darius, but I don't, and because he wanted to. I mean, that was a product of him really wanting to do something with me. But I think in both cases, and they have an ability to get up in front of an audience and just move the audience. So I don't think they need like somebody patting them on the head. And James is getting out here in a lot of different ways now, and I think he just needs to keep doing what he's doing, and it's going to all work out. And I mean, even Sonny Rollins heard him and really loved him.
Yeah,
I know that for a fact. So he's definitely he's out. It's a really difficult thing, and I know those guys. I mean, I know them both well, and I know what they go through and how difficult this business is. But they both have made an impact in which is hard to do these days with all the clutter and noise out here in the world. And they both really have something to say, and they both, I expect great things from both of them.
Yeah. Would you kind of welcome that sort of elder statesman role if it was like thrust upon you, or how does is that just a weird...
No, I think William does it better. Let's just put it that way. I mean, I'm just looking to, I'm 56. I'll be 57 in a couple months. I just want to do some gigs, nice gigs, and kind of ride out in the sunset. My thing I'm really into is my recorded legacy now, and just have some nice gigs, treat it with some respect, and pay my credit cards, man. I'm not, I'm just not really looking to all that stuff that's connected to like the jazz experience. I really just want to play and chill.
So you don't want to do like the artist in residence, festival thing, stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I would love. That would be great to have a week at a festival, do all different bands every night, or have a solo one night, a couple duos, and I mean that I would love. Yeah, I wish the Montreal Jazz Festival would call me up, do a whole week. No, that's a product. That's being out and playing. That would be really beautiful.
Yeah. Now, you gave this lecture at the Stone about nothingness, I think it was, which is going to be included in your next album. So
in a couple of the first pressings, not all of them.
Right. So, talk a little bit about that, because I'm curious how it relates to the sort of Christian mysticism which has been an influence on your music in the past. Like, this seems like a change of pace.
That's what I was talking about. I mean, Christian mysticism at its base is the same as Zen. I mean, you're dealing with creation, and you're dealing with creation out of nothing, or so you had to deal with some type of void, and I guess the best way to look at that, I mean, if you're familiar with quote traditional Christian mysticism, is somebody like Jacob Boehme, the German mystic who dealt with creation coming out of, I don't know, the German word is something like Ungraun, which is the abyss, and he deals with the abyss as a basically a non-dimensional nothing. I mean, but dualities arise out of that singularity, and basically because the singularity wants to get to know itself, and as a singularity, it can't know itself, so it has to create dualities so it can see itself from different vantage points to start. And then there's over a period of time you want to return to the void or to the matrix, and because you see everything out of that, not as an illusion, but as a finite structure, and so it's the same themes. I mean, the Christian mysticism at the bottom is the same themes as Eastern mysticism or anything like that. It's being, nothingness, void, things coming out of the void, and that's and then the generation of space and time out of some dimension that's beyond space and time. So, those themes are prevalent. Whether, I mean, the thing with Christianity is, and I'm not talking about exoteric Christian, or what goes on in churches, but as far as mystical Christianity, the things are just done in a different symbology, but it's at base it's the same thing. I mean, when you listen to Bach, who was a Lutheran organist, and I mean that's high energy physics music, man.
Yeah. When I talked to Roscoe Mitchell the other day, one of the things that because I was asking him, and this sort of ties into what you're saying, in terms of the creation out of nothing aspect, I was talking to him about how important silence is to AACM guys, particularly him and Wadada. And what he said was, he's always considered silence to be 50% of music, and any note that you play has to be able to stand up against the purity of silence, basically.
Oh, that's beautiful, and I agree with him 100%. And knowing I played in Roscoe's band for years. Knowing Roscoe and his music, I know that's behind it. And that is a beautiful way to put it, and I second that emotion.
Yeah. So how has your music changed over the years? Do you think you're a less busy player than you were in '93 or something like that?
Yeah, I'm definitely becoming less and less busier, and I'm definitely there might be a point in a few years. If I could say what I'm like after, what I'm trying to go, I'm actually trying to find the phrase that, like, if I could put one phrase together on a piano that brings space-time into existence. I'm actually trying to find the, like, mystical phrase. There's like 2 or 3 notes put together that encapsulates everything, and if I could get it down to that, that's what it would be. But I'm going a few ways. I'm definitely like trying to. I want to go to the silence. So if I could project what I want to project without any sound, I would do that. But obviously, you got to play some notes.
Yeah.
Or people don't want to come out to your concerts. But it's what I'm saying is about projecting what you're trying to project, and what I'm trying to project has to do with some realm of silence. So in sculpting myself to that point, I'm getting less and less busier, more and more. That's one thing that's going on. There was another aspect, and it's more in my trio, but I'm trying to moonlight as a regular jazz pianist, albeit in my own language, but with my trio, almost sometimes trying to give the illusion that like we're the Amal Jamal trio or something. But I think you know what I'm saying. In other words, the presentation of the music, at least in the trio, is one that could almost be construed as like fitting in a jazz club, but yet the language is something completely different.
So does that mean that, like, at a gig you're now like pausing between tunes? Because there are times when you've played for like an hour straight that I see.
No, I don't stop. I don't stop and talk, because I don't consider myself like having that type of personality as an entertainer where I have anything to say. It's still like, this is the music, take it or leave it, and you play the hour, and I'm definitely not trying to entertain anybody. Actually, I played with my string trio once up at Maine, and at a festival in Maine, and I was talking to the festival promoters, and there were a lot of older people there, so I was just asking them, did they have any feedback from the regulars that go to the festival? And he said, it was like 99% positive. And I said, well, what was it? He said one guy called up and was really complaining that I played the whole set and didn't. He said, well, at least Charles Lloyd stopped between tunes and talked to the audience. So I actually said, yeah, you should give me that guy's email. I'll explain to him, I'll tell him to go fuck himself. I ain't gonna sit there and tell stories between songs. Fuck that. It's just not me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think in my solo playing, I don't know what I'm going for, but I don't really need to know what I'm going for because it's taken on a life of its own, and it's definitely growing. And by growing, I don't mean like more technique or anything. I mean, I do feel like I'm honing down to the very essence of what I want to say. And I don't know. We might get to a point one day where that is one note. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. And within the trio context, does it help having Newman on drums? Because I don't feel like Whit would let you have that much sort of space. He's not that kind of drummer.
Right. Well, yeah, Newman has a very great pedigree as far as he's played with Amon Jamal, with McCoy Tyner, with he's played with Billy Harper. He's played with all the cats like that. So there's definitely a degree of I don't mean this this doesn't sound good, but I don't mean it in a bad way. But there's a degree of jazz professionalism that he has inside of him, even though that's not what he's about. Mm-hmm. And that definitely helps with what I'm going for with the trio.
Yeah,
At this point in my career, yeah.
It anchors you in a sense, because Whit is a drummer who pushes, Like I've seen shows with the two of you where it was like you versus him to a certain degree, And I haven't yet seen the trio with Newman on drums, but the album that you guys did, it's very much a sort of a swinging jazz piano trio in a sense.
Right.
So.
Whit comes more out of a post Sonny Murray type of school. It's a whole different thing,
Yeah.
A whole different thing.
Yeah. You've become a lot more politically outspoken this year than ever before, like as long as I've known you. And while I totally agree with you, I'm curious if you want to talk about how you kind of snapped.
Oh, snapped. Well, DJ T, otherwise known as Donald John Trump, is enough to make anybody snap. This guy is an abomination. It's just not takeable. So, I think I've just been overwhelmed and outraged by a country that could put a buffoon like that in any position of power. That's enough to snap. It should be enough to snap anybody into attention. It's like, you don't think it could get that bad, but it actually has.
Yeah. And I guess part of me is curious because I've had these, dark thoughts myself you're a well-known jazz musician. You're a guy who could make a living, full-time in Europe probably if you wanted to. So, have thoughts of escape crossed your mind?
No, because my father is, 87, and I want to be around if he needs me, and this is where I grew up, and this is my country, or our country, not Donald Trump's country. So I'm not, not giving it over to him and his no, this is our place, make it what we need it to be, and what we need it to be is it for it to work for everybody. We're not on any trip like trying to. I want the best for everybody, even for the assholes that voted for him. As long as they're not white nationalists,
Right.
If anybody did vote for him out of economic grievance, we want to see their lives improve too. Mm-hmm. So they don't have to go to this extreme, to get a point across. But I'm not going anywhere. This is we were born here. This is our place, and we're going to make it work for us.
All right. That's the end of my conversation with Matt Shipp and this episode of the Burning Ambulance podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll subscribe. Again, we're on iTunes and Stitcher, and I hope you'll come back for the next one. Thanks for listening.